Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. And today we are finishing our Mahler cycle. Yes! And we're finishing with the First Symphony because we've done all the others. And I'm going to talk about the best versions of the first. And oh my God, there are so many of them. I'm going to talk about maybe 20 performances here. Good, bad, and indifferent, but mostly the best ones. And again, I can't be exhaustive. It's impossible. There's just too many of them out there. And really the whole situation is still metastasizing as we speak. And I'll be specific about that in a couple of ways in a moment. First, though, I want to talk to you about the work itself, Mahler's First. Oh, what a beautiful symphony. Now, as some of you may know, it began life as a symphonic poem called Titan, after the novel by Jean-Paul. And Titan, I mean, does anyone read Titan? No, not especially. But here's the point. It had 5 movements. The movements had titles. It was written for a smaller orchestra. And along the way, it lost its second movement, which is called Blumine, a flower piece. It's very, very beautiful. It has a lovely trumpet solo. I like it. I like it as a separate piece. It really ought to be played, as sort of an orchestral introduction or overture type piece. It would be lovely in concert. Whether or not it works in the context of the symphony is really up to you. The movement itself was originally part of incidental music that Mahler wrote even earlier for a play called Die Trompeter von Sackingen or something like that. But the bottom line is it was this 5-movement extravaganza, and it later became enlarged orchestrally, especially as regards winds and brass, and reduced in terms of movements. Formally, that one movement, Blumine, the second movement, got extruded. And we now have the 4-movement symphony we know and love. However, what's been happening with Mahler's First, and it is such a pity, is that it's been it's had a mild fit of kooky Bruckner musicology, meaning that all of the early versions and intermediate versions, because Mahler tinkered with it his whole life, as he did all of his symphonies, and these are all being sold to us as separate versions, equally worthy of performance. And they're not. They aren't. This is stupid, horrible, ridiculous, useless, opportunistic, parasitical, everything that you could think negative. That's what this is. So let's talk about what we have and what should exist. The original 5-movement version of the symphony really could be taken out and played once in a while. It's interesting, and it's different enough from the final 4-movement version to justify a separate performance, in my opinion. And the best version of that, if you want to hear the original version, is on the C-Max label. It's this one, with Ole Christian Rudd. It hasn't been recorded very often, only I think 2 or 3 times. Win Morris did it. It's not very good. And there's this one, which is also kind of so-so. It's with the Norrköping Symphony Orchestra, but it's not bad, and it gives you a sense of what the original version of the piece was like. And that's nice. And having heard it once or twice, you never need to listen to it again. Then, subsequently, they have decided that Mahler gave a version of this thing in 1893 in Hamburg. Now, all this is the symphony we know and love, in 4 movements, right? Yeah, it's got 4 movements, same 4, no, 5 movements, with Blumine still in it, pardon me, and almost the one we know and love, but it's every way inferior to the final version in terms of the clarity and intensity and color of the orchestration. There's no reason to play this. All we're saying is that in 1893 in Hamburg, Mahler played the First Symphony, and he tinkered with the score, and that's the version he played. Who cares? It's completely, totally irrelevant, and it has been recorded by Thomas Engelbrock with the NDR Symphony Orchestra on Sony. Here it is. And this has also been recorded a couple times. It's a complete joke and a useless piece of garbage, and you should ignore it entirely. And I really feel very strongly about that. It's incredibly stupid. Now, there have been performances of the first, the final revision of the first, with the Blumina second movement restored. And, you can do it if you want. I don't think it kills it one way or another. Ideally, I think Blumina should be heard in the context of the original symphony. But if you want to put it back and do the final version, which is the best, clearly, of the symphony, that's okay too. It really is. And the best version of that hybrid sort of concatenation is Ozawa's with the Boston Symphony. This is a great first by any standard. It's one of the great firsts. It's gorgeous, fabulously played, and the fact that you have Blumina is a bonus. And if you don't want the Blumina second movement, just play it without it, because it's gorgeous to hear this performance, whether you have it with or without. I think it's one of the great Mahler Firsts. So, there you go. So we got those three issues out of the way, and you now know all the permutations in which the first symphony can come. Those are the three you can find before we get to the one we all listen to, the final version. Now, the rest of this talk is about final versions of the first. First, let's talk about crappy ones. There are so many crappy ones. Here's the thing. The first symphony, in order to be successful, it's in the world of the Wunderhorn, the youth's magic horn, folk poetry sort of things, and the songs Mahler wrote. And it was when he was highly influenced by Carl Maria von Weber and German Romanticism. And, the music needs to be fresh, direct, innocent, and not screwed around with too much. Because if you do screw around with it too much, here's what happens. In the first movement, it just dies. Because the first movement is a very static piece anyway. It has that long, long atmospheric introduction, and then the tunes which are based on, the song cycle, the songs of a wayfarer. The first is Over the Fields I Went at Morning. That's the main theme of the Allegro. And then the stillness returns, and then it has a big rambunctious, concluding section. But you can really make a meal of the slow bits, and they can die. They can really lay there. So the music has to move, it has to flow, and it also can't be tinkered with that much. You've got to play it straight. It doesn't need lots of rubato and messing around. This is even more true in the scherzo. The opening of the second movement is a heavy-footed, peasant-like dance, wonderful Austrian, what they call a Ländler, the forerunner of the waltz. And the trio section, oh God. I mean, some people play it, you would think these people just discovered glissandos and portamentos. Portamento is when you carry one note over to the other. It's almost like a glissando. A glissando is a slide when you go whoop, and hit all the notes intervening. A portamento is very similar. In most cases, on string instruments, they're indistinguishable, actually. But, when you go, yip, and it makes, for example, the tune in that is da-dum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum, ba. That's the opening of the trio of the scherzo. But you can play it, da-dum, da-dum, it sounds more sentimental. There's a limit to how much of that stuff you really need. It needs to be tasteful, and you don't want to hold back so much that the music stops dead in its tracks. And a lot of people think that that's authentic idiomatic style to do that. It's ugh. And then you get to the Funeral March. The Funeral March, of course, has those wonderful interludes of klezmer music, of Jewish dance music. And you got to ham up the Jewish dance music. So many conductors put no soul into it. It's depressing. And the finale, it's just the longest movement in the symphony, and it's very sectional, because you've got this big, turbulent outer section, then a big long lyrical theme, and then a big climax. Then you return to the mood of the first movement. Then it needs to move. It cannot be pulled and pushed about to the point where it has dead spots. And dead spots are the enemy of Mahler's First Symphony. Dead spots where nothing happens, where you're sitting there going, you know what I mean? And that's what happens. And the performers who I think are the kings of dead spots are, first, Loren Maazel, who's recorded it a couple times. Oh my gosh, duller and dullest, boring beyond belief. Lauren Mizell. Blah! Osmo Venska, whose latest recording of the first on BIS was absolutely the most terrible performance to come around in many a decade. It's just, atrocious. Atrocious. It is one giant dead spot. The whole performance is dead. Deader than dead. Another conductor who kind of monkeys around with it, he's not as dead as some of the others, but I think is somewhat affected, is Michael Tilson Thomas. Also not very interesting. And then there's the conductor who I am most annoyed with when it comes to the First Symphony, and that's Bernard Haitink. Why Bernard Haitink? Well, because Bernard Haitink recorded it 4 times. And Haitink was that conductor who, in a famous gramophone interview, said, "Oh, people make 2 recordings. Mahler symphonies particularly are special. They should not be played and recorded so often." Then he went to do 4 more, right? I mean, he's the biggest hypocrite in the business. And he's done it 4 times. There is one great one, and the rest are all completely forgettable. The first one he did was in 1962 with the Concertgebouw for Philips. And it's okay, but it's not special. It was when he was just starting with that orchestra, and he hadn't quite gotten his legs under him. And it's a very, very soft-edged and somewhat, a slight performance. He remade it with the Concertgebouw just before the digital era. It's an analog recording. That's the great one. It's fantastic. He had come into his own. He had the orchestra playing fabulously. It's magnificent. It's absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Then he did it in Berlin. And then he did it again in Chicago. Unbelievable. So, Haitink annoys me. And unless you can get the second Concertgebouw recording, which I think was from like 72, somewhere in there, there's no point. There's just no point. So, now we're going to talk about all of the really, really good ones. And, so many there are. I think I've got about like 15 left or some. It's oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. Here they come. Are you ready? I didn't even decide which one I like best. Yeah, I sort of did. All right, here, I'm going to put it here. Here's the one I like best. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Here's one that really, really deserves lots and lots of acclaim. It's a singleton performance. There is no other Mahler by the same conductor. Riccardo Muti in Philadelphia. This is a great Mahler 1. Absolutely great. And it was done at a time when, Mahler 1 wasn't done all the time. Ormandy did it. He did it with Blumina, actually, for RCA. And it's pretty good. It's actually pretty good. But this Muti Mahler 1, it was a fantastic performance, just sort of ignored because he wasn't a Mahler conductor. It's very similar to the Andre Previn Mahler 4 that he made in Pittsburgh, which is another great Mahler performance that's a singleton performance that nobody pays much attention to for that reason. But if you can get it, you should consider it. Okay, which one is this? I didn't even know I had this. This is handy. Yes, this is a marvelous one, too. Ivan Fischer, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous playing. Beautiful, beautiful playing. Absolutely wonderful. And very similar in terms of playing, in terms of the playing to this one, Manfred Honeck with Pittsburgh on Exton. I have to say, these two are kind of like the great modern Mahler ones, and they're similar in certain ways. I think this one, Honeck's, is a little bit livelier, a little bit fresher, and a little bit more vivid, just in terms of like the acoustic space in which it's recorded. But Fischer on Channel Classics, which I'm holding upside down very stupidly, there we are. Fischer is also superb, and either one will do you very well. I think here, particularly the trio, the middle section, that is of the Funeral March, oh my God. The string playing is so beautiful, so beautiful. And you understand exactly why you need vibrato and what it can do when it's managed correctly with taste and color and sensibility. It's just a knockout. The other sort of singleton performance that really, really never gets much attention but really deserves to because it's just fabulous is this one. Zubin Mehta with the Israel Philharmonic. Now, he did this more than once. He did another one for Teldec with New York, which is also quite good. It's very, very good. But this is absolutely spectacular or maybe it was Sony. I don't know. He did it more than once. Here's the one you need to get. Israel Philharmonic on Decca. Absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous performance. Exciting, fresh, enthusiastic, full of life. It's what Mahler First should be. Really should be. You know, it's not a hard symphony to do. Of all the ones that I've played the first the most. I must have done it a dozen times. And it works. It's one of those symphonies that ought to play itself almost if the conductor doesn't get in the way. It can only be ruined by having a conductor with ideas most of the time. Really, I'm serious. That's what happens. They just make it worse. You know, and I get so tired of these people whose sole claim to fame is that they interfere with the natural musical impulses of the orchestra, which can play it without him, probably better, or her, you know. Anyway, so now we're going to do with all the rest of these are in boxes, so I have them in a separate pile. Okay, Bruno Walter. Bruno Walter did it twice. There's a mono one and a stereo one. The mono one, which sounds very, very good, by the way, is more exciting than the stereo one. But the stereo one is still excellent. There's no exposition repeat in the first movement. We're not going to care. And also the scherzo has like a little exposition repeat at the beginning, which nobody cares about particularly. You don't have to. Most people do it. In those days, they didn't. Big deal. Walter was he had the music in his bones. These are great performances. Bernstein famously, when he heard the stereo Bruno Walter, said, "Whoa!" And he canceled his soon-to-be-made Sony recording of the first because he wanted to give Bruno Walter an opportunity to get the acclaim for his version, which was a very kind thing to do and a very smart thing to do because Walter's is better than Bernstein's. Maybe he knew what was coming, you know? So there's that one. Next, Gary Bertini. This is a wonderful set. This is like the most consistent and best total Mahler Symphony box, if you're looking for Mahler Symphony boxes. But, you know, it's with Cologne Radio. It's extremely fresh, natural, and beautifully played and recorded. Wonderful performance. Absolutely wonderful performance. Also wonderful. Chailly. If you want the Concertgebouw and you're as annoyed with Haitink as I am when it comes to Mahler's First, and you can't find that 70s Mahler one, which is the only one of the four he left that you should have, just get Chailly. It's great. It's absolutely great. The orchestra sounds glorious. The sonics are terrific. And the performance, again, it has that freshness and unfussy fluidity and excitement and newness and color and all of the things the piece should have. Very, very beautiful. Another excellent one. I see how fast we're moving because these are all really, really good performances. You don't have to dwell on them. I just need to sort of tell you what they are. Kondrashin, if you can find it on Melodia. Kondrashin was a great Mahler conductor. His Mahler symphonies are lots of fun to listen to. They're all sort of fast, pow, you know, that sort of, you know, the orchestra has that sort of Russian edge to it. I think it's extremely, extremely enjoyable. And these are fun if you can still find them. They really are. Also, a wonderful, wonderful Mahler one that gets no attention at all anymore. Levine with the London Symphony Orchestra. This is first-class Mahler conducting. It really is. And the LSO plays a great Mahler one. They always did. I mean, you know, don't forget, there's also the Schulte on Decca. And Schulte redid it in Chicago. It's not nearly as good. His London Symphony Mahler First is one of the great ones. And the only problem with it is that sonically it's a little dated. It was one of those recordings where, I don't know whether it was Kingsway Hall or wherever they did it, where they would roll off the bass so you wouldn't hear the underground rumbling underneath the concert hall during the performance. But it's Schulte's first Mahler one. With the London Symphony on Decca is a great one. And this Levine Mahler one, which is a razor sharp and totally committed, is also a great one. Really, really terrific. Next, Bernstein and the Concertgebouw. A beautiful performance. Now here's something interesting. Bernstein was one of those guys whose first Mahler First, the Sony one, you could argue with, sort of falls into that, you know, manipulated fussiness category. You know, and that manipulated fussiness category is it's the kiss of death in Mahler 1. I listened to it again recently. It wasn't as bad as I remembered it being, but this one with the Concertgebouw, he seems with the Concertgebouw, also with his Mahler 4 too, to have just relaxed and let the music come forth naturally, or more naturally. It has a very quick funeral march, about 9 minutes, really, really quick, very surprising, and a really, really powerful and exciting finale. Now, just around the time he made this, Bernstein gave a series of concerts in New York, Mahler First, and I saw all of them. I mean, there were like four performances, and I saw him do Mahler 1 many times over the years, and mostly in New York, and I remember so vividly one of the performances. They were all fabulous, except there was like the third one, like the Friday night one. It was like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, something like that. But the second or third, one of those middle performances, after the big climax, the fake climax in the finale, the fake one where the music dies down and goes back to the mood of the very, very opening, and then the lyrical theme comes back on the cellos with ya da 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 da, very, very hesitantly. They got completely lost. Totally, completely lost. Everybody it just went to pieces. And Bernstein was like sitting there looking at them like in horror. I was looking at the back of him. I couldn't see, but I could sort of see the horror. He turns to the cellos like this guy, like, oh, what the hell? And he's looking at the violins, and they're all getting kind of out of whack, and he's trying to get them back together, and he like slows everything down and sort of does this, like for them to like stop and wait a minute, and he's like telling them where they are, and they finally got back together. It was hilariously horrifying. And I just remember when it was over, Bernstein turned around to the audience, and he just went, it's like, happens to the best of us. Nothing we can do. Sometimes that's just the way it goes. And that was the way it went. It was very, very amusing. Now, this is my surprise fabulous Mahler 1, Boulez's Chicago. Now, Boulez, as you know, I mean, he can do music with, you can suck all the juice out of anything. I mean, he could do the most desiccated, emotionless, sterile music making in the universe. But boy, he really got into this Mahler 1. It sounds like he's having a whale of a time, and it's the best one that Chicago ever did. It really, really is. I mean, they did it, remember, also with Giulini on EMI. That's a performance that I think is a little bit too sober. It lacks some of the joy that the music should have. But this Mahler 1 is absolutely great. Great and very well recorded. Very, very exciting. Very exciting. Boulez, believe it or not. It's a Mahler 1 with a lot of juice in it. God knows what happened. Maybe he took a pill or something before he conducted it. Who the hell knows? Almost finally, this is a great Mahler 1 too. Gielan. Now again, this is, Mahler 1 it's basically a happy symphony. Thank God it has a funeral march, or Gielan would never look at it, right? It's got to have something dismal and gloomy for Gielan to look at it. But he captures again that fresh, wide awake, innocent fun that the piece has. Gielan is never a conductor I would accuse of having fun with anything, but he does with this Mahler 1, and it's superbly well recorded. It's a great sounding Mahler 1. Beautiful, beautiful performance. However, oh my goodness, I'm losing it here. However, no, it's okay, just let them all sit there. If I had to choose just one Mahler 1, the one that I think still has the most wonderful combination of wide-eyed innocence and excitement and thrust and charm and character and color, it would have to be Kubelik. Kubelik with the Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing that Kubelik has. This is not the best recorded sonically. The modern digital ones sound better. So I wouldn't make this my only Mahler 1, but I would make it my first Mahler 1. The one thing that Kubelik does better than anybody is he nails the klezmer music in the funeral march. It's so perfectly done. Da 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 da, and the trumpets come in with accents. Ba da 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 ba da ba da da. It's so fabulous. it is so right that when you hear anyone else do it, you can't really listen to it without thinking, why couldn't they do it the way Kubelik did it? It's that kind of a performance. And that's true of all of it. The finale is really, really exciting. It's just perfect, I think. And its pacing and its shaping and it's everything that he does is just right. Just right. And with that, we come to the end of our entire Mahler survey of all the Mahler symphonies. Next, of course, I have to do my ideal Mahler cycle list, which I'm going to wait a little while before doing that. There's no rush, right? You've got now videos on every single Mahler symphony. You can take a look at them. You can assemble your own ideal Mahler cycle, but don't do it yet. We're not there yet. And I think we've had a wonderful time going through all the Mahler symphonies. I've had a wonderful time talking to you about them. I hope that my take on them has given you some things to think about when you're listening to them. But in the meantime, if you want to get a great first, start with Kubelik. Get this one. It will serve you well. Very, very well. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much. Take care.